remember that they're changing my voice. Before I get into Lamentations chapter 1, which is just a short chapter, I want to explain something to you, okay? Now, the modern Western system is like Babylon. It's a huge part of it, okay? Jerusalem was said to turn into like the center of Babylon in Revelation. When you couple Revelation and Isaiah 1, it's clear that that's what's going on. And one of the main places that you see Jewish people in the world is America. I think that there's actually more Jewish people in America than there are in Israel. And when it's talking about the spirit of Jerusalem or the Jewish people, that is what they're talking about in a sense. Now keep in mind, it gets a little tricky here. Okay, they like the little tricks where the Bible is superimposed on another people. So they're doing, the people doing it, whoever they may be, we'll say, are doing kind of occult rituals on black people because it's based on the Igbos, right? The Igbos specifically. And that has to do with who was in Egypt in terms of what spirit and what characteristic, right? The Egyptians, respected Igbo characteristics more than other characteristics, so they had a specific Igbo pharaoh. Now, I'm not talking about the average Igbo. I'm talking about specific types that I'm the last person who's going to fit the description ever, and I'm the top martial artist ever possible. Okay. If you just bear with me, you'll see that I'm right. So, Babylon is centered in many ways in America. In many ways, it's centered in Israel. In many ways, it's centered in the UK because of the influence of the Jews and the white people there. In a sense, there's something to be said about Germany and Italy and the Vatican and so on and so forth. So when you look at Lamentations, right, what is it talking about? Is it talking about Jews in Israel alone? No. Okay. Is it talking about, black people alone? No. What it's talking about is the failure of all people, and it's kind of, they're using one people as an example. They're using the Israelites in the story as an example. Okay, so what it's talking about is the failure of all peoples, especially whites, Jews, and LGBT people. That's what the story is talking about. Okay, the Romans and the Jews and the LGBT community in Greece and Rome, right? That spread to Rome, right? Okay. They are the ones who killed Jesus in the story. And that's symbolic. I'm not saying that so you go out and call them names or something. I'm saying that because that's part of the story. Say, what brought down the planet? If you're an alien that landed here, you'd say, hey, whites, Jews, and LGBT people colonized the world and destroyed every culture they came across. And there was one culture that was there from God Almighty, the Royal African Falcon martial art culture, right? That's what their Egyptians were saying. It's what everyone in that area knew. Okay? Because the Egyptians zoomed in on characteristics, on what? Qualities, characteristics. Okay? So the Igbo hero, right? This guy goes beyond Martin Luther King, right? Who has no kind of counterpart in any other group, tribe, race, culture, you name it. Okay, religion. Okay. When they went around the world, they got rid of everyone who was kind of friendly to him, and they left him alone, and then his flesh dies and people are sealed in hell. That's what Lamentations is talking about. This person has a vision of what it's going to be like in the future, and he's explaining what happens in the future, and there's parallels to what was happening at the time. Okay, so when we look at, for example, the statue of Pan you see on the screen, say, why is this statue on the screen? Because it's certain Babylonian characteristics that are the center of the culture. Now, I'm going to have to say something a little bit disturbing to help you understand this. You need to understand this. There's a reason why the rebels, people who rebel against God, are compared to dung in the story. The evil in the cultures of the world that are mostly coming from the West and Israel and the LGBT community, again, everyone's doing the wrong thing. I have to point this out. No offense to those groups. Okay? Is central to their cultures. It's not something that is no big deal to them. It's central. Because if you value, surfing and skating and singing and whatever else, French fries or whatever you might like, okay, and whatever you might think is important, then why would you allow for that filth to contaminate it unless you believe that it's central? Let me give you an example. If you had a first grade play, okay, and I'm going to have to make a disturbing example to help you understand why I'm right. If you had a first grade play, and in every first grade play, they decided they want a little kid to take a crap on stage during the play, okay? And you get together and you discuss your culture, and there's liberals and there's conservatives, and they're changing things all the time, and things are evolving. Unless that little kid taking that crap was central to your culture, would you allow him to do that on stage? Wouldn't you just get rid of it and say, hey, that's ruining the rest of the play. The rest of the play is what's important and not that kid doing that. So when they don't get rid of that, they say that is more important to them than the things that it is contaminating. It's important that you understand that. Because cheating me out of my right to lead is far worse than that kid taking a crap on that stage. It ruins everything. Okay, so now let's get into this and see the fate of the jealous bastards and everyone who cheats me out of my right to lead, who is jealous in their own way. Lamentation 1. How deserted is the city, once so full of people? How like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. It means to sin. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers there is no one to comfort her. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. Now, when we look at Revelation, it says the beast will despise the whore, and the beast is the kings and the other nations. Okay? The whore is said to be Jerusalem, Israel, the Israelites, their spirit. So they all betrayed her. She teamed up with them, right? Judeo-Christian culture. And they destroyed each other, and they destroyed themselves. After affliction and harsh labor, Judah has gone into exile. She dwells among the nations. She finds no resting place. All who pursue her have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. Notice it flat out says Judah. But it's also talking about Israel, because of Jerusalem being the heart of Israel, the core spirit, the core component of the spirit of Israel. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her appointed festivals. All her gateways are desolate. All her gateways are desolate. Her priests groan, her young women grieve, and she is in bitter anguish. Her foes have become her masters. Her enemies are at ease. The Lord has brought her grief because of her many sins. Her children have gone into exile, captive before the foe. So she's mastered by Western culture, Babylonian culture. She's mastered by fake conceptions of Judaism. That's what it's saying. That there's no mosque, synagogue, or church that's right with God is what it's saying. All the nations. Because if you have any significant representation in the nations, then you are basically part of those nations. And they're the foes of Israel and the foes of God. That's what it's saying. The Lord has brought her grief because of her many sins, and the main sin is cheating me out of my right to lead. You'll see how it says that when we get to verse 18. All the splendor has departed from daughter Zion. Her princes are like deer that find no pasture. In weakness they have fled before the pursuer. Okay, so the angel of death is pursuing them. They fled. Oh, no. But it's not. The pursuer is swifter than they are. And their splendor is gone. There's no woman worth marrying. There's no guy worth marrying. That's what it's saying. In the days of her affliction and wandering, Jerusalem remembers all the treasures that were hers in days of old, when her people fell into enemy hands. There was no one to help her. Her enemies looked at her and laughed at her destruction. So they're laughing at each other. You see these mockers laughing. Oh, ha, ha, ha. They're telling jokes about how pitiful they are, and with comedians and so on and so forth. Jerusalem has sinned greatly, and so has become unclean. All who honored her despised her, for they have all seen her naked, and she herself groans and turns away. They're not just talking about porn. They're talking about she doesn't have the fine linen that stands for the righteous acts of the saints in Revelation 19. Her filthiness clung to her skirts. She did not consider her future. Her fall was astounding. There was no one to comfort her. Look, Lord, on my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. So the author is saying the enemy has triumphed over him and his people. And he's somewhat at least going down with the ship at this point in the story. Okay, she's been raped by deception. Okay, the waters, she sits by many waters. The waters are filthy waters of people in rebellion against God, peoples, nations, multitudes, languages. It's saying the whole world. And so it's symbolic of that kind of their filthy sexual and spiritual interactions. The enemy laid hands on all her treasures. She saw pagan nations enter her sanctuary, those you had forbidden to enter your assembly. All her people groan as they search for bread. They barter their treasures for food to keep themselves alive. Look, Lord, and consider, for I am despised. Is it nothing to you? All who pass by look around and see. Is any suffering like my suffering that was inflicted on me, that the Lord brought on me in the day of his fierce anger? From on high he sent fire, sent it down into my bones. He spread a net for my feet and turned me back. He made me desolate, faint all day long. Just like you see these weirdos, right? It's like a little kid in class who bothers some little girl and she tells him, stop, and it's annoying, right?